Who is Jeffrey Epstein? What was he, and what did he become? How does a man move from anonymity into rooms filled with power? And how does a name become known across the world, not for success, but for controversy? This is not a story built on rumor. It is a story built on records, court documents, property deeds, flight logs, testimonies given under oath. For years, the information existed, but attention did not. According to publicly available biographical records, Jeffrey Epstein was born on January 20th, 1953, in Brooklyn, New York. He grew up in a middle-class neighborhood, not wealthy, not influential, just another child in a city of millions. He showed early academic strength in mathematics and science, but his path would not follow a traditional route. Early career. As documented by school employment archives, Epstein briefly worked as a mathematics teacher at the Dalton School in Manhattan, an elite private institution, despite not holding a college degree. It was an unusual beginning. A door opened without the credentials usually required. But the door would not stay open forever. According to financial industry reporting from the late 1970s, Epstein entered the world of Wall Street shortly after leaving education. He worked at the investment bank Bear Stearns, a move that shifted his environment from classrooms to capital. From there, his life began to change. The circles he moved in expanded. His associations grew more powerful. His image transformed. As reported by major newspapers at the time, Epstein became known as a financier with connections, attending social events, meeting influential individuals, and cultivating relationships across politics, academia, and business. How does reputation become protection? When does influence delay scrutiny? And how much can exist in plain sight without being fully seen? In the late 1990s, a purchase would define the next chapter of his life. According to U.S. Virgin Islands property records, Epstein acquired a private island known as Little St. James, a 70-plus acre property located southeast of St. Thomas in the Caribbean. Public land registries indicate the island had changed hands before, once owned by private investors and later listed for sale as a luxury estate. Its appeal was simple: isolation, privacy, and exclusivity. It was marketed as a sanctuary, a retreat from the world. According to real estate listings and interviews from the period, the island offered complete control of access, private docks, helipads, and expansive land untouched by public traffic. Isolation is not evidence, but it is a condition. Property photographs released through civil proceedings later showed guest houses, main residences, utility buildings, and landscaped grounds. Staff were employed for maintenance, transportation, and hospitality, much like any high-end private estate. Visitors described the island in conflicting ways. Some called it luxurious. Others described it as secretive. In public imagination, the island became a symbol, not merely of wealth, but of mystery, a place both photographed and speculated about. But speculation is not documentation. According to federal court filings and civil lawsuits, prosecutors and plaintiffs later referenced the island as one of several locations connected to allegations under investigation. Legal language is careful. It does not dramatize, it records. As his wealth and social connections grew, so did public attention. Invitations, photographs, and media coverage created an image of access to influence, to private spaces, to people few could reach. But attention is not always scrutiny, and visibility is not always transparency. The story of Jeffrey Epstein is not a single event. It is a timeline, a sequence of records, relationships, and decisions that slowly formed a public narrative. And before any allegation reached the headlines, there was an image. Before the image, there was a background. And before the background, there were choices. The question is not only what happened. The question is how long the information existed before the world began to look. For years, Jeffrey Epstein's public image was built on photographs, introductions, and invitations. But eventually, the story began to move from social pages to court pages. According to publicly available court archives from Florida in the mid-2000s, allegations involving underage girls began to surface, not in tabloids first, but in legal filings. Legal documents do not shout. They list dates. They list statements. They list charges. And they wait for someone to read them. As documented by police reports in Palm Beach County, an investigation began after a parent reported concerns involving her teenage daughter. Interviews followed, statements were recorded, names appeared, not in headlines yet, but in transcripts. The process was slow, methodical, procedural. And in procedures, time often moves differently. According to federal and state court records, in 2008, Epstein entered a plea agreement related to charges of soliciting prostitution from a minor. The agreement became controversial, not because it existed, but because of its terms. Public reporting from major newspapers later described the sentence as unusually lenient compared to the scale of allegations. But legal agreements are not written in emotion. They are written in language. And language can be interpreted differently by everyone who reads it. How does a legal document change public perception? When does a name move from society pages to investigative reports? And how much attention does a case receive before attention becomes scrutiny? Names appeared as passengers. Dates appeared beside destinations. But context remained a matter of interpretation. Records show movement. But movement does not explain intention. And intention is where investigations begin. As investigative journalism expanded in the late 2000s, previously archived material returned to public attention. Stacks of newspapers, headlines blurred. According to major media investigations, reporters revisited earlier cases, court files, and testimonies that had existed for years. Information had not disappeared. It had simply not been connected. Behind every document is a person. Behind every testimony is a memory someone wishes did not exist. As stated in sworn civil court testimonies, multiple women described recruitment patterns, locations, and interactions that became central to later legal actions. Testimonies are not statistics. They are experiences written into record. According to federal indictments filed in New York in 2019, prosecutors charged Epstein with sex trafficking and conspiracy. This time, the language was broader. The scope was larger. The attention was global. The name that once appeared in business articles now appeared in nightly news broadcasts. The shift from image to record is rarely sudden. It is gradual. It is built from pages, interviews, timelines, and voices that accumulate until they cannot be ignored. And sometimes the most powerful revelation is not new information. It is old information, finally being read. In investigations, there are moments when the story shifts, not because new events occur, but because old documents become visible. According to publicly released court records and unsealed filings in multiple jurisdictions, thousands of pages connected to the Epstein investigations entered the public domain over several years. These were not new accusations. They were existing materials, depositions, correspondence, flight logs, and civil court exhibits, documents that had once been sealed or partially restricted. A file release does not create new evidence, it changes access. According to federal and state court procedures, Records may be sealed during active litigation to protect privacy, witnesses, or due process. When cases conclude, judges sometimes order portions unsealed in the interest of transparency. Unsealing is not a verdict, it is visibility. According to official statements from the U.S. Department of Justice and court transcripts, the government's role in these releases was procedural rather than editorial. Agencies do not publish narratives, they release documents as ordered by the courts. Some records were redacted, not to conceal facts, but to protect personal data, minors' identities, or individuals not charged with crimes. Public reporting from major investigative outlets described the volume of material as extensive, tens of thousands of pages across civil suits, depositions, and exhibits accumulated over decades. The scale did not necessarily indicate new wrongdoing. It indicated the length of the timeline and the number of legal proceedings involved. Length can be mistaken for revelation, but length often means complexity. This is where documentaries must be especially careful. In civil depositions and flight logs, many names appeared. Appearance, however, does not equal accusation. Mention does not equal guilt. According to legal experts quoted in major newspapers, names may appear for many reasons: social contact, professional meetings, or mere association, without implying criminal involvement. Court documents record who was referenced. They do not automatically determine why. For viewers encountering these documents for the first time, the presence of recognizable names created emotional impact. But legal systems distinguish between being mentioned and being charged. That distinction is often lost in public conversation. Behind the legal language, behind the redactions, behind the procedural releases, there remained the voices that began the cases in the first place. For survivors, file releases were not revelations. They were confirmations, proof that their statements had always existed, even when few were listening. Documents do not speak on their own. They require readers. The files were not hidden forever. They were waiting for attention. And attention once given cannot easily be taken back. In loving memory of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, to those who were harmed, to those who carried their pain in silence, to those who survived and found the strength to speak, and to those whose stories were never heard, whose names we may never know, whose suffering was never documented. We remember you, we honor you, and we acknowledge the lives forever changed. Not every victim received justice. Not every truth was uncovered. Not every voice made it into the record. But remembrance matters, and silence should never be the final chapter. If the records were there, why did it take so long to listen? How many warnings does it take before power is questioned? When wealth opens every door, who is responsible for closing the dangerous ones? Is silence a failure of the system, or a choice made by those who benefit from it? How many lives are changed forever while the world looks the other way? And the hardest question of all, if this could happen in plain sight, what else are we still not seeing? Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening with empathy. Thank you for allowing these stories to be heard. Awareness begins with attention, and attention begins with you. If this documentary moved you, if it unsettled you, if it stayed with you, please subscribe, like, and share. Not for popularity, but so silence has less room to survive. Power thrives in silence. Truth survives in memory.